For 800 years, no foreign army had breached the walls of Rome.
Gate, one of the great fortified entrances in the walls of Rome, swings open from the inside. Not broken, not breached, opened. On the other side, the Visigoth army of Alaric has been waiting outside the walls of Rome for months.
Not a single one. Then, on the night of August 24th, 410 AD, a Gothic army poured through the Salarian Gate and tore through the Eternal City in 3 days of fire and looting. The man who led them was not some distant barbarian warlord. He was a Roman-trained general, a former ally, a man the empire itself had armed and employed. His name was Alaric, and the fall of Rome under his command was not a sudden catastrophe. It was the final act in a slow, grinding collapse of trust, betrayal, and broken promises that played out across 3 separate sieges. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how one man went from loyal Roman soldier to the destroyer of the world's greatest city, and why the empire's own decisions made it happen. To understand Alaric, you have to understand where he came from. Around 376 AD, on Puce Island in the Danube Delta, a boy was born into the Balti dynasty, one of the most respected noble families among the Visigoths. His people had crossed into Roman territory not as invaders, but as refugees, fleeing the Huns who were tearing across the steppe. Rome had promised them land. Rome had promised them food. What they received was starvation, abuse, and betrayal at the hands of Roman officials who saw them as a problem to be managed, not people to be sheltered. That broken promise shaped an entire generation. 2 years after Alaric's birth, in 378 AD, that generation struck back. At the Battle of Adrianople, a Gothic army crushed the Roman Emperor Valens and his forces. Valens himself died on the field. The defeat shattered the idea that Rome was unbeatable. For the young Goths who survived it, Adrianople was proof that the empire could bleed. Alaric grew up among those veterans. He grew up hearing their stories. He grew up knowing what Rome had promised and what Rome had delivered. When Emperor Theodosius the Great died in 395 AD, the fragile peace he had built between Rome and the Goths died with him. The empire split between his 2 young sons. Arcadius took the east. Honorius, barely a child, took the west. The Visigoths saw the moment for what it was: leaderless, divided, vulnerable. They elected Alaric as their king. He was roughly 19 years old. His first move was bold. He marched toward Constantinople itself. But the eastern capital's defenses held, and Alaric found no easy entry. So he turned west. He pushed through the Balkans, probing Roman defenses, gathering followers, building strength. The common view of Alaric is that he was a wild destroyer bent on Rome's ruin from the start. The evidence tells a different story. What Alaric wanted, repeatedly, and across years of negotiation, was a homeland for his people and a recognized place within the Roman system. He wanted a title, land, and grain for his followers. He wanted legitimacy. Rome refused him again and again. In 402 AD, Alaric crossed into Italy for the first time. He met resistance at the Battle of Palencia from Stilicho, the Western Empire's most capable general, himself of half-Vandal origin. Stilicho did not destroy Alaric's army outright, but he did overrun the Gothic camp. It was a stinging blow. The following year, in 403 AD, Stilicho caught Alaric again at Verona. This time Alaric's army was surrounded, cornered, nearly finished. But Stilicho did something unexpected. He let Alaric withdraw into Illyricum. Why? Most historians believe Stilicho saw Alaric as a useful counterweight against the Eastern Empire. A dangerous ally was still, in Stilicho's calculation, better than a dead one. That calculation would cost Rome everything. For 5 years, a tense balance held. Alaric sat in Illyricum. Stilicho managed Honorius. Then, in 408 AD, the balance collapsed. Honorius, now a grown man, but no wiser than the child he had been, turned on Stilicho. Court rivals whispered that Stilicho was plotting to seize the throne. In August of 408, Honorius ordered his arrest and execution. Stilicho, the one man who had beaten Alaric twice, was dead. And in the massacre that followed, Roman soldiers turned on the families of Gothic troops serving in the imperial army. Wives and children of Gothic federates were slaughtered across Italian cities. 30,000 Gothic soldiers defected to Alaric in response. The empire had just handed its greatest enemy an army.
On August 24th, 410 AD, the Visigoths didn't break down the gates of Rome. The gates were opened from the inside, by slaves, by people who'd been living inside the empire for decades, and had quietly stopped believing in it. Rome wasn't murdered. It was hollowed out over decades by three forces that had nothing to do with barbarians. The first was money.
Alaric moved fast. In the autumn of 408, he crossed the Alps from Noricum into Italy and marched straight for Rome. Not Ravenna, where Honorius hid behind marshes and walls, but Rome itself, the symbolic heart of the world. He encircled the city. He cut the supply lines from the port of Ostia. Rome began to starve. The Senate, desperate, sent envoys. One ambassador reportedly warned Alaric that the people of Rome were armed and ready to fight. Alaric laughed and said the thicker the grass, the easier to mow. The first siege ended not with battle, but with payment. The Senate agreed to a ransom of 5,000 pounds of gold, 30,000 pounds of silver, 4,000 silk tunics, 3,000 scarlet-dyed hides, and 3,000 pounds of pepper. Alaric lifted the siege and withdrew, but his real demand remained unanswered. He wanted a homeland, a recognized position, and a treaty with Honorius. In 409 AD, Alaric returned. The second siege was not about ransom. This time, Alaric forced the Roman Senate to elevate a puppet emperor, a senator named Priscus Attalus. With Attalus on a rival throne, Alaric had leverage. He could negotiate with Honorius as an equal, or so he believed. But Attalus proved useless, unable to secure Africa's grain supply, unable to command real loyalty. Negotiations with Honorius dragged on, and then collapsed entirely when a contingent of Germanic troops in Roman service, led by a Gothic commander named Sarus, attacked Alaric's forces without warning. The attack was small, but the message was clear. There would be no deal. In the summer of 410 AD, at Ariminum, modern Rimini, Alaric publicly stripped Attalus of his imperial title and reopened negotiations with Honorius one last time. The two men even held a personal meeting. Alaric offered peace in exchange for land and grain. By every account, he was willing to settle. But once again, Sarus and his men attacked Alaric's camp during the negotiations. Whether Honorius ordered it or simply allowed it remains debated. What is certain is that the attack destroyed the last possibility of peace. Alaric had spent years trying to work within the Roman system. Every attempt had been met with betrayal, delay, or violence. He was done negotiating. On the night of August 24th, 410 AD, the Visigoths broke through the Salarian Gate on Rome's northern wall. The city that had not fallen to a foreign enemy in 800 years, not since the Gauls under Brennus in 390 BC, fell in a single night. How they got through the gate remains a genuine historical mystery. The most common account says that slaves inside the city opened the gate from within, but another version, recorded in some late antique sources, tells a stranger story that Alaric sent 300 young Gothic men into Rome disguised as a gift to Roman senators. And these men rose at the appointed hour and opened the gates themselves. Scholars still argue over which account is true. Both versions agree on one thing: the gates did not fall by force. They were opened by betrayal. For 3 days, from August 24th to August 26th, the Visigoths sacked Rome. Fires burned through entire neighborhoods. Homes were looted. Captives were taken by the hundreds, perhaps thousands. The Salarian quarter near the gate suffered the worst. But Alaric imposed one limit that set this sack apart from what could have been total annihilation. He declared the basilicas of St. Peter and St. Paul inviolable sanctuaries. Anyone who reached those churches was to be left unharmed. The sources, including those hostile to Alaric, confirm that this order was largely obeyed. Gold and silver vessels from the churches were carried in a kind of procession through the streets to St. Peter's, guarded by Gothic and Roman Christians alike. Rome burned, but it was not razed. The sack was brutal, selective, and short. On August 26th, the Visigoths left Rome and marched south into Campania, taking captives with them. Among those captives was Galla Placidia, the half-sister of Emperor Honorius. She would later marry Alaric's successor, Athalf, and become one of the most powerful women in the late Roman world. But Alaric never lived to see that future. His plan after Rome was to cross into North Africa, where the grain supply that fed the Western Mediterranean originated. Control Africa, and you control the empire's food. He reached Rhegium, modern Reggio Calabria, at the toe of Italy, and assembled a fleet to cross into Sicily. A storm struck. Ships sank. The crossing failed. Alaric fell ill shortly after, late in 410 AD, in the city of Cosenza, in the mountains of Calabria. Alaric died. He was in roughly the 28th year of his reign as king of the Visigoths. His followers buried him in the riverbed of the Busenta. They diverted the river, dug the grave, placed Alaric and his treasures within, then turned the waters back over him. The slaves who did the digging were killed so that no one would ever find the burial. To this day, no one has. The shockwave of Rome's fall traveled across the entire Mediterranean world. Jerome, writing from Bethlehem, described his anguish in terms that still carry weight. He said that the city which had conquered the entire world had itself been conquered, that the bright light of all lands had been put out, that with one city, the whole world had perished. In North Africa, Augustine began writing The City of God in direct response to the crisis, arguing that Rome's fall was not the end of civilization, but a sign that earthly empires were never meant to last forever. Pagans blamed the Christians for abandoning the old gods. Christians blamed the pagans for their sins. Everyone blames someone, but here's what most people miss about 410 AD. Rome did not cease to exist after the sack. The Western Empire stumbled on for another 66 years. The Senate still met. Emperors still ruled from Ravenna. Trade continued. Life continued. What changed was something harder to measure. The idea that Rome was eternal, that its walls could never fall, that the order it imposed on the world was permanent. That idea died on August 24th, 410 AD. Alaric spent his entire adult life asking Rome for a seat at the table. Rome answered with broken treaties, murdered allies, and an emperor hiding behind swamps. So here's the question worth thinking about. If Rome had given Alaric what he asked for, land, grain, a title, would the city have ever fallen at all? Or was the empire already so broken that someone eventually was going to walk through those gates?